Thank you, Acting President. I rise to speak on behalf of Legalised Cannabis on the proposal to establish an inquiry into the demolition and redevelopment of, well, not simply 41 towers or 44 towers, but really multiple estates. I come to this, I guess, with a deep sense of engagement. Personally, I've worked on the Kensington Estate redevelopment on the Community Reference Group and also on the Building Standards Committee for about 8 years, and was intimately involved with that project. And of course, that was the first government PPP, public-private partnership, to explore this process of redevelopment. It also came after Jeff Kennett had, I think, nuked the first tower, and then the incoming Labor government decided to refurbish the remaining 2 towers at Kensington, and I'll come back to that. I think maybe in thinking about this motion, the first thing is that this is not about buildings, it's about people, and it's about the people who are living in these towers, and it is about the people that need to be able to access affordable, safe housing, whether it is public, whether it is community-based. And unfortunately, I think much of the debate that has occurred in this place has all too often broken either on partisan grounds, or it has broken on semantics, rhetorical semantics, that have not allowed for a really fulsome discussion of the issues. So I do come to this with very strongly held views, and I also know really well a lot of the people who live in these places. I've lived in Kensington for 30 years. I'm a couple hundred metres from the Kensington estate. I'm about 500 metres as the crows flies from the North Melbourne estate, and probably 700 metres from the Flemington estate. And I have relationships with all of those people. And those people, particularly the ones in the towers, are very vulnerable. They are people who have a precarious hold on life in terms of financial as well as accommodation, as well as just social relations. There are lots of problems with these buildings, and I'll come back to that. Secondly, these people have also, for example, in the case of the Flemington estate, went through a process in 2017 where the then Housing Minister, and I'm disassociating from the current Housing Minister, absolutely on this point, but the exercise that went on the Flemington estate in 2017 was absolutely atrocious. And the government simply ignored all of the lessons that came out of the Kensington redevelopment, basically told both community resident representatives as well as local community representatives to just stay out of the way. It was really an atrocious approach, and of course it imploded. And then of course for many of these residents as well, they've been further traumatised by the effects of the lockdown during COVID. And I think we all know, I don't think there's any debate about how terrible it was for those people. So in coming to the process of demolition and relocation that is being proposed through this project, and I'm not saying that this is not without merit as a project, but in coming to that, we are dealing with people who've been through hell and back. And I think that needs to be more important than sometimes what might be political point scoring. Now, we have sought to work with government and with the sponsors of this motion to find common ground, and I thank the Minister and I thank the Minister's staff for their time, and I'm disappointed that we couldn't find middle ground between the sponsors and the government. Returning to the Kensington estate, one of the outworkings of the Kensington estate redevelopment was a report by Swinburne University that critically evaluated the processes that have been undertaken through the development process. There were valuable learnings for how future projects were to be potentially rolled out. And in the 2017 rollout, those were completely ignored. Talking to the Minister, I understand that in fact the government has a far more sympathetic approach to that, and I welcome that. And that includes things like consultation, not only with the residents, but also with other neighbourhood stakeholders, with service providers, with schools, with health services. Because when you close down these buildings, you profoundly impact the whole ecosystem that exists around them. And that is a really big issue. And I take Minister Shing's private discussions with us, if I may say that, but that she is concerned to make sure that there is not a replication of that. But at the same time, we're also hearing that multiple towers will be demolished in the very, very near future. And clearly central to what's in Swinburne is that you don't just knock down the buildings. You actually need to do a lot of work prior to that, and it's not just about consulting with the residents concerned. And there are obviously different views between who you speak to about whether or not the consultation's been good or otherwise. Certainly in terms of the people I speak to, and these are the people that grab me when I'm on the street going to the supermarket or into the local shops, they are deeply traumatised, yeah? And it's not a product of being told this by the Greens, it's not a product of being, whatever. These are people who are genuinely distressed, and the communications with these people, the consultations with their representatives, and the consultations with other stakeholders in the neighbourhoods have not been adequate. In terms of the actual motion itself, it seeks to address a number of things. Clearly, this motion comes after, for want of a better term, a failed documents motion. Now, that documents motion could be critiqued as being a bit of a shopping list, but the fact of the matter is that there was a lot of information that was sought which would have informed this debate. Rather than simply taking this position or that position, there is hard data that could have been presented any time over the last 6 months that would have addressed questions like, what's the business case for the redevelopment? Now, 10 years ago, when the Kensington housing estate, the towers were being refurbished, the fact of the matter, there was two building realities. One building reality was that these buildings are hugely over-engineered, okay? They are incredibly robust structures. But within them, the services had profoundly decayed. So if you look at the towers now, they are pretty much fully occupied. In many cases, they've been retrofitted and converted. There are a whole lot of things that can be done in these buildings because they are simply so robust. And so to suggest, I think, that there's $2.3 billion which will be band-aids, I'd really like to see the evidence of that, because I think that if it was fine to do it a decade ago, what's changed on a 50-year-old building? I live in a 148-year-old house, and there's various colloquialisms I could apply, but I think the acting president would probably take umbrage with the descriptions I might use for them. But these are very robust buildings, and they are retrofittable. You can double glaze them, you can ventilate them, you can sprinkle them. But again, none of the data has been presented that would change that. So I guess in that sense we go, all right, well, if you're going to take out 44 towers, you take the government's own numbers. We're looking at about 10,000 people being decanted. You do a basic back of the envelope at what's being built, and the first question you ask is, well, it would seem to me on the back of the envelope basis, what the government's actually proposing to build and roll out will be fully absorbed just by that relocation process. And if we allow, say, 4 to 5 years to get these projects rolling, and that's how long these things take to get to commissioning, we're basically going to be seeing a situation where the government would be rolling out a new replacement equivalent to those high-rise towers, about 2 per annum for 20 years. And so I just can't see how the numbers currently stack up. Thank you. So we have a whole range of other issues. We would welcome disclosure from the government as to the sort of issues that have been identified, and that doesn't need to await an inquiry, and obviously terms of inquiries can be amended if those documents are provided and the rationale provided. And I would hope that the government would avail itself of that. I know that that's not as good as we've been discussing previously, but that may be a way forward. I would just conclude in thanking again the Minister for her time, the Greens for their time, and we will be supporting the motion.